Amara Bell was on her knees on a cold marble floor when her phone rang with the words that made her whole body go numb. Elijah's oxygen is dropping fast. We need to do the surgery tonight, or we might not get another chance. Amara was not at a hospital when she heard this. She was standing in the middle of a giant glowing party, holding a silver tray of champagne glasses, wearing a caterer's apron over her black dress. 3 miles away, her 7-year-old son was lying in a hospital bed with a small, tired heart that had a hole in it. A hole that had been slowly getting bigger every single day of his short life. She had 6 hours to find $50,000. And the only people in the entire city who had that kind of money were standing right in front of her. The same people who, just 20 minutes earlier, had looked at her like she was something dirty, stuck to the bottom of their expensive shoes. Nobody in that big shiny ballroom knew who Amara really was. They saw a quiet woman in an apron, refilling their glasses, and they never once wondered about her story. They didn't know she used to be a nurse in a hospital's most serious ward, saving lives every single night. They didn't know she had given up that job for one that paid more money, because more money meant a better chance for her son to live. And they definitely did not know that hidden under her collar, resting against her skin, was a small gold necklace that used to belong to her mother. A necklace that, in just a few minutes, was about to make the richest, most powerful woman in the whole city freeze in place and start to cry. "Get her out of my sight," a voice had said only minutes before, loud enough for half the room to hear. It belonged to Billionaire Cross, and her eyes moved over Amara's simple black dress like it was an insult to her marble floors. "She is not good enough to even stand near my son, let alone work at his engagement party." The words hit Amara hard, like a slap she couldn't block. But Amara did not cry. She had survived worse things than mean words from a rich woman. She had survived long nights praying in a hospital chapel over a baby who the doctors said might not live to see his first birthday. What Amara did not expect was for Eleanor's eyes to suddenly drop down to her neck, for the older woman's hand to fly up to her own throat, and for her voice, that same cold, sharp voice, to crack into something soft and afraid. "Where," Eleanor whispered, "did you get that necklace? If your heart is already beating a little faster, you are not alone. Stay with this story, because in just a few minutes, you are going to find out exactly why that necklace changed everything. And if stories like this one touch your heart, tap that like button right now, because it helps more people find stories just like this one. Let's go back 6 months, to the very beginning, to understand how Amara Bell ended up in that ballroom in the first place. Amara had not planned on working for a rich family. She had grown up in a small apartment with her mother, Grace, a nurse who worked long shifts and came home smelling like hand soap in hospital hallways, but who always had time to hug Amara before bed. When Amara grew up, she became a nurse too, just like her mom, because she wanted to help people the same way. She married young to a kind man who made her laugh, and together they had a son named Elijah. But life is not always fair. Elijah's father passed away before Elijah turned 2, and not long after, doctors found the small hole in Elijah's heart. Amara's whole world became about one thing: keeping her son alive and giving him the surgery he needed. Being a nurse paid enough to survive, but not enough to pay for a heart surgery that cost more money than Amara would make in 5 years. So when Amara saw an advertisement for a private chef job that paid 3 times what she made at the hospital, she almost didn't believe it was real. She almost didn't go to the interview. But she thought about Elijah's tired little face, and she put on her nicest shirt, and she went. She expected to meet an assistant or a manager. Instead, the huge front door of Cross Manor opened, and standing there was a tall man with messy hair and a wrinkled white shirt, sleeves rolled up like he had been doing something with his hands. His name was Julian Cross, and even though Amara didn't recognize him at first, she would later learn he was one of the richest men in the entire country, the boss of a company worth billions of dollars. Julian looked at her resume and raised an eyebrow. "You used to be a nurse in the ICU," he said. "That's a serious job. Why would you want to cook dinner for rich people instead of saving lives?" Amara looked him straight in the eye. "Because rich people pay better," she said honestly. "And my son needs a heart surgery that saving lives doesn't pay for." Julian laughed. Not the fake, polished laugh he used at business meetings, but a real one, surprised right out of him. "Well," he said, "that might be the most honest answer I've heard in this house in 10 years. You're hired. Please try not to poison me." From that very first conversation, something started to change between them, even though neither one of them planned for it. Julian was quick with jokes and clever comments, the kind of charm he used like a shield, because it was easier to make people laugh than to let them see how lonely he actually felt. Amara noticed this almost right away, and instead of being nervous around him, she teased him right back. "You know," she told him one evening, watching him try, and completely fail, to cut an onion properly in his own giant kitchen. "For a man who owns 4 companies, you are really bad at basic survival skills." "I delegate," he said, pretending to be offended, holding the knife like it had personally betrayed him. "Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like helplessness wearing a nice suit. This suit is Italian. Thank you very much. The suit isn't the one bleeding from a paper cut, Mr. Cross." He laughed so hard he had to put the knife down, and something in his chest loosened in a way it hadn't in years. Over the months that followed, these evenings in the kitchen became Julian's favorite part of every single day. The only hours that felt like they truly belonged to him, and not to his father's business meetings or his mother's endless rules about who he was supposed to be. He learned that Amara hummed old church songs while she cooked. He learned she kept a photo of a smiling, gap-toothed little boy taped inside her recipe notebook. He learned that when something truly made her happy, she laughed with her whole body, and that underneath her quick jokes, she was carrying a weight so heavy it was a wonder she could still stand up straight and smile at all. And Julian, without really meaning to, started finding excuses to walk through the kitchen even when he wasn't hungry, just to hear her voice. But there was a big problem. Julian Cross was engaged to be married, not because he loved someone, but because of business. His father, Richard Cross, had spent 2 years working on a huge deal between Cross Industries and a company called Whitmore Capital. The last piece of that deal was shaped like a wedding. Julian would marry Vanessa Whitmore, the daughter of Richard's old rival. Vanessa was polished and smart, but she saw Julian the same way she saw a stock she wanted to buy. Something valuable that would help her family gain more power. And Vanessa had sharp eyes. She noticed, the way people who are always watching for threats do, exactly how Julian's face softened whenever the hired chef walked past. Vanessa Whitmore did not like threats to the things she believed belonged to her. Here is something worth remembering while this story keeps going. Sometimes the people who look the strongest on the outside are hiding the biggest fears on the inside. Keep that in your heart, because it matters later. And if you want to see more stories about people finding real strength when life gets hard, make sure you are subscribed, so you never miss the next one. As the months went by, Amara and Julian's friendship kept growing, one small moment at a time. Every Tuesday, Julian would sneak into the kitchen right when Amara was making Elijah's favorite soup to send home for him, and every Tuesday he would try to help. And every Tuesday he would somehow make things worse instead of better. Once he tried to season the soup while Amara wasn't looking, and added so much pepper that Amara took one sip and started coughing so hard. She had tears in her eyes. "Are you trying to poison me first before I can poison you?" she gasped, grabbing a glass of water. "I was improving it," Julian said, trying very hard to keep a straight face. "Every great chef takes risks. The only risk here was my throat." "Julian." He laughed so loudly that 2 of the household staff peeked into the kitchen to see what was happening, because nobody in that huge, quiet house had ever heard Julian Cross laugh like that before. It became a kind of secret between them. These small, silly moments that had nothing to do with money or business deals or last names. Julian started asking Amara questions about Elijah almost every single day. What made him laugh? What cartoons he liked? Whether he was scared before his doctor visits. And slowly, without either of them planning it, Julian started leaving small things for Elijah with Amara at the end of her shifts. A book about space, a little toy race car, a soft blanket with stars on it for the nights Elijah had trouble sleeping. One evening, Amara found Julian sitting on the kitchen floor. Of all places, trying to fold an old paper airplane the way Elijah had shown him in a video call. He said if I could get it to fly across the living room, he'd teach me how to do a better one, Julian explained, looking almost shy for the first time since Amara had met him. I have failed 4 times. You run 4 companies, Amara said, sitting down on the floor next to him in her work apron. And you cannot fold a piece of paper. In my defense, business meetings do not usually involve aerodynamics. She took the paper from his hands, folded it in about 10 seconds without even looking, and sent it soaring clean across the kitchen. Julian stared at it, then at her, completely stunned. How did you do that? I have a 7-year-old son, Julian. I could probably build an actual airplane at this point. It was in moments like these, quiet, small, unimportant to anyone watching from the outside, that something real began to grow between them, something neither of them had words for yet, and something neither of them was ready to admit out loud. But everyone around them could feel it starting to happen, including the one person who would try the hardest to stop it. The night everything changed was the night of Julian and Vanessa's big engagement dinner. A huge party meant to announce their marriage to 200 of the most powerful people in the whole city. Amara had begged her manager to let someone else work that night, because Elijah had been running a fever for 2 days. And something deep inside her, the same instinct she had as a nurse, told her this was not just an ordinary fever, but she needed every single shift, every extra dollar, because Elijah's doctor had just told her that the safe window for his surgery was closing faster than they had hoped. So she went to work anyway, tying her apron tight, telling herself it was just one more night, one night closer to having enough money. She was refilling glasses near the big glass doors when her phone rang. It was her sister, and her voice was shaking. Amara, you need to come right now. They're saying it's an emergency. They're saying if we don't schedule the surgery tonight, his heart might not make it to the new date. The tray in Amara's hands began to shake. $50,000. 6 hours. She had $1,100 in her savings account, and her next paycheck wasn't coming for another week. It was in that exact frozen, terrified moment, phone pressed against her ear, tears blurring the sparkling lights above her, that Eleanor Cross found her. Is there a reason? Eleanor said coldly, walking toward her in a gown that probably cost more money than Amara made in an entire year. That the help is standing here crying into a telephone instead of doing her job. The whole room had gone quiet enough that people turned to look. Vanessa, standing close to Julian with her hand resting on his arm like she owned him, smiled a thin, satisfied smile, watching a problem solve itself right in front of her. Get her out of my sight, Eleanor continued, every word sharp as a needle. She is not good enough to even stand near my son, let alone work at his engagement party. I don't know what game you're playing, but the Cross family does not spend time with people like you. Amara had been called worse things by worse people, and long ago she had learned that dignity was the one thing nobody could take from her unless she handed it over herself. So instead of falling apart, she stood up straighter, wiped her face once, and said quietly, "My son is dying, Mrs. Cross. I'm sorry my pain was inconvenient for your party." She turned to walk away, and that was the exact second when the little gold necklace, shaken loose during her trembling, swung fully out into the light. Eleanor's whole face changed. "Where?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "Did you get that necklace?" Amara's hand flew up to protect it. "It was my mother's. What was her name?" Eleanor's cold, perfect posture had completely fallen apart. Her hands were shaking now, and tears were filling her eyes, the same eyes that, only moments ago, had been as hard as ice. "What was your mother's name?" "Grace," Amara said, confused and guarded. "Grace Bell. She passed away 6 years ago. Why does that matter to you?" This is the part of the story where you should get ready, because everything is about to change. Amara has no idea yet what she is about to find out. Before we keep going, if this story has your full attention, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love seeing that, and it helps this story travel further so more people can find it too. Eleanor made a sound like all the air had left her body, and she reached out, grabbing Amara's wrist so tightly it almost hurt. The whole ballroom had gone completely silent now. 200 of the richest and most powerful people in the city, all watching a scene none of them could understand. and Julian was already crossing the room, his charming, easy smile completely gone, replaced by real fear at the sight of his mother's tears. "Mother, what's going on?" 31 years ago, Eleanor said, not to Julian but to Amara, her voice breaking apart. "I almost died giving birth. I was bleeding so much that the doctors thought I wasn't going to survive the night. A young nurse refused to leave my side. She held this exact necklace against my hand the whole night, and she told me that God wasn't finished with me yet. She saved my life. And because she saved my life, that means she saved yours too, Julian." Eleanor turned to her son, tears now streaming down her face without stopping. "If I had died that night, you never would have been born. I never learned that nurse's full name. I only remembered the necklace because I asked to hold it once, and she let me, and she told me it had been passed down in her family for 3 generations. I have thought about that woman for 31 years, wondering how I could ever repay a debt that big." Eleanor turned back to Amara, her whole body shaking. "Your mother saved my life, and I just humiliated her daughter in front of the entire city." The room, which just minutes ago had been thick with judgment and whispered gossip, now sat in complete, breathless silence, waiting to see what would happen next. Amara, caught between the pain of the last 5 minutes and the shock of this enormous discovery, felt her knees almost give out beneath her. But there was no time to sit with any of it. "I have to go," Amara said, gently pulling her wrist free, tears now falling for a completely different reason. "My son needs surgery tonight, and I don't have the money. I have to get to the hospital. I'm sorry, I have to go." Her voice broke completely, and for the first time in 6 years of holding herself together for Elijah's sake, Amara Bell collapsed into sobs in the middle of the Cross family ballroom. Julian did not hesitate for even 1 second. He took off his jacket, wrapped it gently around her shoulders, and said the only words that mattered. "Tell me where. I'm driving you myself." Vanessa's hand shot out to stop him, her calm mask finally cracking into open anger. "Julian, you cannot seriously be thinking about leaving our engagement dinner for the hired help's personal problems." The word help hit the room like a gunshot, and for the first time ever, Julian turned to face his fiancée with a look colder than anyone had seen on him before. "Her name is Amara," he said, "and her son is dying. If that's just a personal problem to you, Vanessa, then you and I have a much bigger problem than tonight." He didn't wait for her to answer. He took Amara's hand and walked straight out of the ballroom, leaving 200 stunned guests, a crying mother, and a furious fiancé behind him. At the hospital, everything became a blur of bright lights and beeping machines and doctors, speaking quickly in serious voices. Elijah's small chest was rising and falling too fast. His lips were turning slightly blue, and Amara held his tiny hand and promised him, the same way she had promised him every single day of his short life, that she would not let anything happen to him. Julian stood in the hallway and made one phone call. By the time he hung up, the surgery was fully paid for, scheduled for that very same night, with the hospital's very best heart doctors called in from 2 other hospitals to help. "Don't argue with me," he said softly, before Amara could even open her mouth to protest. "You've been fighting alone for 6 years. Let someone stand next to you, just for one night." The surgery took 4 long hours. Amara spent every single minute of it, holding tightly onto Julian's hand in an uncomfortable waiting room chair. And somewhere around hour 3, completely exhausted and stripped of every wall she usually kept up, she finally let her head rest against his shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her, like it was the most natural thing in the entire world. "I need you to know something," Julian said quietly into the silence of the waiting room, "that no matter what happens after tonight, with my mother, with Vanessa, with the whole company, none of it changes how I feel about you. I've been trying to talk myself out of this for months, Amara. I'm done trying." "You're engaged," she whispered. "Not for much longer," he said, and for the first time all night, a small, tired smile tugged at his mouth. "Watching your fiancé call a grieving mother the help has a funny way of making everything clear." When the surgeon finally walked into the waiting room, tired but smiling, and said the words, "He's going to be just fine," Amara sobbed with relief right into Julian's chest, and he held her the way he had wanted to for months, without any of the jokes or armor he usually hid behind. Just two people who had quietly been falling for each other, while both of them pretended they weren't. If a happy ending like that made you smile, imagine how many more moments like this are waiting in this story. Hit that subscribe button now, because we are only about halfway through, and things are about to get much harder before they get better. The weeks after that night were not easy or simple. Richard Cross was furious that the business merger had fallen apart. Vanessa's family threatened lawsuits over the broken engagement, and half the gossip in the city started spreading a nasty rumor that the chef had faked a sad story just to trap Julian Cross into falling for her. Reporters started showing up outside Cross Manor. Strangers online said cruel things about Amara without knowing a single true thing about her life. Vanessa, humiliated and furious about losing both the marriage and the merger, decided she would not go down quietly. Vanessa hired a private investigator to dig through every part of Amara's past, hoping to find something, anything, that would prove she was only after Julian's money. When the investigator found nothing but a woman who had worked hard her entire life to take care of her sick son, Vanessa decided that if the truth wasn't scandalous enough, she would simply make one up. She leaked a fake story to a gossip magazine claiming that Amara had lied about her son's illness completely, that there was no surgery, no hospital bill, and that the whole thing had been a trick designed to win Julian's sympathy and his money. The headline ran the very next morning: Cross family chef faked sick child to trap billionaire. Julian read the headline standing in his own kitchen, the same kitchen where he and Amara had shared 100 small, ordinary, happy moments. And for one terrible second, doubt crept into his heart. He knew it wasn't true. He had seen Elijah's hospital bracelet with his own eyes. He had paid the surgery bill himself. And yet the headline sat there in bold black letters, and somewhere deep down, in the part of him that had spent his whole life being taught to trust business instincts over feelings, a tiny, cruel whisper asked, "What if?" That whisper lasted only a moment, but it was long enough for Amara to see it on his face when she walked into the kitchen, holding a newspaper of her own, her eyes red from crying, and asked him a question that would decide everything. "Do you believe them? We are getting close to the most important moment of this whole story, and I promise you, what happens next will completely surprise you." If you want to know exactly how this story ends, and you don't want to miss the next one just like it, make sure you're subscribed and that notifications are turned on, because you will not want to miss what comes next. Julian did not answer right away, and in that small silence, Amara felt her heart crack in a way it hadn't cracked since the day the doctors first told her about Elijah's heart. She had survived being called not good enough by his mother. She had survived being called the help by his fiancé, but she was not sure she could survive Julian doubting her, even for one single second. "I don't believe them," Julian finally said, stepping toward her, taking both of her hands in his. "I hesitated, and I am so sorry that I hesitated, even for a second. That was wrong of me, and I promise you it will never happen again. I know the truth, Amara. I paid the hospital bill myself. I sat next to you in that waiting room for 4 hours. I am not going to let a lying headline written by a bitter woman erase what I know is real." He pulled out his phone right there in the kitchen and made a call to his lawyers, and then to a reporter he trusted, determined to fix the damage himself. But fixing gossip is never simple, and the story spread faster than Julian could stop it. Richard Cross, already furious about the broken merger, saw this as the perfect excuse to end things once and for all. He called Julian into his office and told him plainly that if he continued this relationship with some hospital worker with a sad story, he would be removed from leading the company his entire life had been built around. It was, Richard believed, an easy choice for any sensible businessman to make. Love or legacy. Julian stood in his father's office, the same office he had been groomed to sit in one day, and for the first time in his life, he said no. "I have spent my whole life doing exactly what this family expected of me," he said. "I got the right grades. I took the right job. I agreed to marry a woman I didn't love because it was good for business. But I am not doing that anymore. If loving Amara means losing this company, then I will walk out of this building today and never look back, because a company can be rebuilt. A love like this cannot." Richard was stunned into silence. something that almost never happened to him. And it was Eleanor, standing quietly in the doorway the whole time, who finally spoke. "Richard," she said softly. 31 years ago, a young nurse chose to stay by my side instead of going home to her own family, because she believed saving my life mattered more than her own comfort. Her daughter just showed our son the same kind of love. If we let this family's pride destroy something this rare, we do not deserve the second chance Grace Bell gave us all those years ago." Richard looked at his wife for a long moment, and something in his hard, business-focused heart softened. Just a little, for the first time in years. That same week, Eleanor did something nobody expected. She called a press conference, standing in front of every camera and reporter in the city, and told the whole truth herself. 31 years ago, she said, her voice steady and strong, a young black nurse named Grace Bell saved my life during a delivery that almost killed me. I never got the chance to properly thank her before she passed away. Weeks ago, I judged her daughter, Amara, before I ever gave myself the chance to know her. I let a job title and a paycheck convince me she wasn't good enough for my family, when the truth is, my family would not even exist without hers. The recent story claiming Amara lied about her son's illness is completely false, cruel, and untrue, and I am ashamed that anyone connected to my family had a hand in spreading it. I hope everyone watching this learns that lesson faster than I did. The city's opinion turned almost overnight. Reporters who had printed cruel headlines now printed apologies. People who had left unkind comments online deleted them in embarrassment. And Vanessa, exposed for planting a lie, quietly disappeared from the social pages she had once ruled, her family's business deal with Cross Industries falling apart completely, this time for good. We are almost at the end of this story now, and I promise the ending is going to make you smile. But before we get there, if this story has taught you anything about not judging people before you know their heart, share it with someone who needs to hear that today. That's the kind of thing that matters more than any like or subscribe button. Though, of course, we would love it if you hit both. 6 months later, in that very same ballroom where Eleanor had once tried to have her thrown out, Amara stood in a soft gold dress that had nothing to do with anyone else's expectations of her. She held Elijah's hand, his cheeks full and pink now, his laugh loud and free and completely unafraid, while Julian slid a ring onto her finger in front of a much smaller, much warmer crowd of people who truly loved them. Eleanor cried harder than anyone else in the room, holding tightly onto the very necklace Amara had let her borrow just for the ceremony, the same little gold necklace that had traveled from one grateful, grieving mother to another across 31 years, and 2 entire generations of a family that almost never found each other. Elijah, standing proudly beside his mother in a tiny suit that made him look far too grown-up, tugged on Julian's sleeve during the reception and asked him a question that made the whole room laugh through happy tears. "Does this mean you're my dad now?" Julian knelt down to look him straight in the eye and said, "Only if you'll have me." And Elijah threw both arms around his neck so tightly that Julian had to steady himself so they wouldn't both fall over. It was, Eleanor said later, the exact moment she knew this family had finally healed something that had been broken for a very long time. Amara Bell had walked into that mansion 6 months earlier as a woman the world had taught to expect nothing, to ask for nothing, to feel grateful for scraps. She walked out of it as living proof that your worth is never something other people get to decide for you, that the woman they once called not good enough had been carrying more strength, more grace, and more love inside her the entire time than the family who once looked down on her could have ever imagined. And somewhere inside that truth is a lesson worth holding on to long after this story ends. The people who work hardest to make you feel small are so often standing in the shadow of a light they don't understand yet. Don't let anyone's cruel words tell you who you are. Keep being kind, keep working hard, and keep believing that good things can still find their way to you, even on your darkest nights. If this story touched your heart even a little bit, do 3 simple things for me before you go. First, hit that like button, because it truly helps stories like this one reach more people who need to hear them. Second, leave a comment and tell me your favorite part of the story, because I read every single one. And third, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because there is a brand new story just like this one coming very soon, and you will not want to miss it. Thank you so much for staying until the very end, and I will see you in the next story. Years from now, Elijah will probably not remember every detail of that scary night in the hospital, or the party where his mother cried in front of 200 strangers, or the newspaper headline that tried to tear his family apart before it even fully began. What he will remember is simpler than that. He will remember a mother who never once gave up on him, even when she had almost nothing left to give. He will remember a man who chose to kneel down and look him in the eye instead of talking over his head. And he will remember, every single time he sees a small gold necklace, that sometimes the smallest, quietest kindness a person ever gives can travel farther than they ever imagined. All the way across 31 years, into the hands of the very people who need it most.